Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. When a man looks at you and says, "You're not like other women," that ain't just a compliment, that's a confession. That's him admitting he doesn't quite understand you, he can't quite predict you, and most importantly, he can't control the outcome with you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me break something down for you in a way that's real raw and honest. When you are a woman who challenges a man's expectations, you step into a space that most men are not prepared for. See, most men move through life with a certain mindset about women. They've seen patterns, they've experienced similarities, and over time, they build a comfort zone around what they think women are supposed to be like. They get used to reactions they can predict, emotions they can manage, and behaviors they can influence. That becomes their reality, their playbook, their sense of control. But then you come along, and suddenly the rules don't apply anymore. You're not responding the way he expected. You're not impressed by the things that used to work. You're not chasing his attention, you're not feeding his ego, and you're definitely not losing yourself trying to gain his approval. Now, he's confused, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something unfamiliar. And unfamiliar to a man who thrives on predictability feels like a threat. You see, when you challenge a man's expectations, you force him to think differently. You make him step outside of his comfort zone. And most people, especially men who haven't done the inner work, don't like being uncomfortable. They don't like situations where they don't have the upper hand. They don't like not knowing what comes next. So when they meet a woman who doesn't fit into their usual category, they don't always know how to handle it. Now, let's be clear, it's not that he doesn't notice your value. Oh, he sees it. He sees the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you don't. Tolerate nonsense. He sees your independence, your confidence, your ability to walk away from anything that doesn't serve you. And that right there, that shakes him. Because now, instead of dealing with someone he can influence, he's dealing with someone who influences him. And that's a whole different ball game. When a man is used to control and suddenly he can't control the dynamic anymore, he starts to question himself. He starts wondering if he's good enough, if he can measure up, if he can maintain your interest. And instead of rising to that challenge, a lot of men retreat. They pull back. They become distant. Not because they don't care, but because they care more than they're comfortable admitting. You got to understand something. Your uniqueness disrupts his emotional rhythm. He's used to things being simple, being easy, being predictable. But you bring depth. You bring standards. You bring a level of awareness that forces him to look at himself in a way he hasn't before. And for a man who hasn't faced his own flaws, that can feel overwhelming. So what does he do? He hesitates. He overthinks. He second guesses. And sometimes he disappears. Not because you're too much, but because you're more than he's used to. And let me tell you something that's important. You are not responsible for making yourself easier to understand just so he can feel comfortable. You are not meant to shrink your personality, lower your standards, or adjust your values just to fit into someone else's expectations. The moment you start doing that, you lose the very thing that makes you special in the first place. Your power lies in the fact that you are different. Your strength comes from the fact that you don't conform. And your value is rooted in the fact that you know who you are, and you refuse to compromise that for temporary validation. When a man encounters that kind of woman, it forces him to make a decision. Either he steps up and evolves, or he steps back and exits. There's no middle ground, because a woman like you doesn't allow confusion to linger. You don't entertain inconsistency. You don't beg for clarity. You expect alignment. If it's not there, you move on. That's what makes you intimidating. Not your attitude, not your tone, not your independence alone, but your unwillingness to settle for less than what you deserve. And that's something a lot of men aren't ready for, because it requires effort. It requires honesty. It requires emotional maturity. And if he hasn't developed those qualities yet, then instead of rising to meet you, he'll label you as too different, too strong, or too much. But what he's really saying is, I'm not ready. So when you hear that phrase, you're not like other women, understand what's really being said. That's him acknowledging that you don't fit into the box he's used to. That's him recognizing that you operate on a different level. And yes, that recognition can come with admiration, but it also comes with fear. Because now he knows this isn't something he can take lightly. This isn't someone he can play with. This isn't a connection he can mishandle without consequences. And for a man who isn't secure in himself, that realization is heavy. But let me leave you with this truth: being the woman who challenges expectations is not a burden, it's a blessing. It means you're not ordinary. It means you're not replaceable. It means you bring something into a man's life that forces growth, clarity, and truth. And if that terrifies him, then maybe he's not the man who deserves to experience you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that a lot of people don't want to admit. Strong women don't scare real men, they expose weak ones. And when I say weak, I'm not talking about money, status, or how a man looks on the outside. I'm talking about emotional weakness. I'm talking about a man who hasn't done the work on himself, who isn't secure in who he is, and who relies on control, manipulation, or inconsistency to maintain his position in a relationship. Now listen carefully. When a man meets a woman who knows her worth, who has boundaries, who carries herself with confidence and doesn't fold under pressure, something happens, something shifts. Because now all those little tactics that used to work, they don't work anymore. The charm without substance, the attention without intention, the words without action under that lands with a strong woman. And that's where the exposure begins. You see, a weak man survives off imbalance. He's comfortable when he has the upper hand. He's at ease when the woman is more invested than he is. When she's chasing, when she's trying to prove herself, when she's tolerating behavior she shouldn't tolerate. That imbalance gives him power. It allows him to move however he wants without being held accountable. With a strong woman, she evens the playing field. She doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't beg, she observes. She doesn't tolerate confusion, she demands clarity. And just like that, the dynamic changes. Now the man has to show up for real. Now he has to be consistent. Now he has to match energy, match effort, match intention. And if he can't do that, he feels it immediately. He feels the pressure of being seen for who he truly is, not for who he pretends to be. And let me tell you something, nothing makes a weak man more uncomfortable than being seen clearly. Because a strong woman doesn't just listen to what you say, she watches what you do. She pays attention to patterns. She notices inconsistency. She picks up on hesitation. And she doesn't ignore those signs just to keep a man around. She addresses them or she walks away. Now imagine a man who is used to getting away with things. Imagine a man who has built his confidence on women accepting less than they deserve. When he meets someone who doesn't accept that, it shakes him. It disrupts his entire sense of control. And instead of stepping up, a weak man will often try to flip the narrative. He'll say you're too much. He'll say you're too demanding. He'll say you're hard to deal with. But what he's really saying is, I can't meet your standards. And rather than admitting that, he tries to make you feel like the problem. That's the game. But a strong woman doesn't fall for that. She understands that having standards is not a flaw. She knows that expecting respect, consistency, and honesty is not asking for too much, asking for the bare minimum. And she refuses to lower those standards just to make someone else comfortable. Now here's where it gets deeper. Strong woman doesn't just expose a man's actions, she exposes his mindset. She forces him to confront parts of himself he's been avoiding. His lack of discipline, his fear of commitment, his inability to communicate, his tendency to run when things get real. And for a man who isn't ready to grow, that kind of reflection is uncomfortable. So what does he do? He withdraws. He creates distance. He avoids the situation altogether because it's easier to walk away than it is to evolve. But understand, this is not your strength that pushed him away. It's his weakness that couldn't handle your strength. There's a big difference. And too many women get that confused. They start thinking, maybe I should be softer, maybe I should be quieter, maybe I should ask for less. That's not the answer. Because the moment you start shrinking yourself to keep a weak man, you lose yourself in the process. And let me tell you something that's never worth it. A strong woman isn't meant to be easy to handle. She's meant to be respected. She's meant to be valued. She's meant to be met at her level. And if a man can't do that, then he doesn't qualify to be in her life. It's that simple. Now let's flip the perspective for a second. Because not all men are weak. A real man, a secure man, a mature man, he doesn't feel threatened by a strong woman. He feels challenged in the right way. He sees her strength and says, I need to rise to meet that. He respects her boundaries. He admires her confidence. He values her independence, not as something that takes away from him, but as something that adds to the relationship. But a weak man, he sees all of that and feels small. And instead of growing, he resents it. That's why he pulls away. That's why he acts distant. That's why he labels you instead of leveling up. Because your presence forces him to face the truth about himself. And not everyone is ready for that truth. So when you find yourself in a situation where a man is intimidated by your strength, don't take it as rejection. Take it as revelation. It's showing you exactly who he is. It's revealing his capacity, his mindset, his level of emotional maturity. And once you see that, you have a choice. You can either lower yourself to meet him, or you can walk away and wait for someone who can rise to meet you. And a strong woman, she already knows the answer. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something that hits deeper than most people realize when a woman is truly authentic. When she is fully herself without apology, without pretending, without performing, it creates a kind of emotional pressure that a lot of men are not prepared to handle. Now understand this, most people in the dating world are wearing masks. They're presenting versions of themselves that they think will be accepted, liked, or desired. They say the right things, they act the right way, they adjust their personality depending on who they're dealing with. And over time, this becomes normal. It becomes expected. So men get used to interactions that are surface level, controlled, and easy to navigate. But then you come along and you're real. You're not trying to impress him with a version of yourself that isn't true. You're not bending your values just to keep his attention. You're not playing games, waiting hours to reply just to seem busy, or pretending not to care when you actually do. You show up as you are, clear, grounded, honest. And that kind of authenticity, it creates pressure because now he doesn't have anything to hide behind. You see, when you're real, it forces the other person to be real too. It removes the space for manipulation, for confusion, for half-truths. You bring clarity into the situation, and clarity is uncomfortable for someone who is used to operating in gray areas. A man who is used to vague communication, mixed signals, and emotional distance suddenly finds himself in a situation where everything is direct. And that's when the tension begins. Because authenticity doesn't just invite connection, it demands it. It asks for honesty in return. It expects consistency. It requires emotional presence. And if a man is not used to showing up that way, he starts to feel the weight of it. Now he's thinking, I can't just say anything to her, I have to mean it. I can't just show up whenever I feel like I have to be consistent. I can't just disappear and come back. I have to be accountable. That's pressure. Not because you're asking for too much, but because you're asking for something real. And let me tell you, something real is rare. And because it's rare, it's unfamiliar. And because it's unfamiliar, it can feel overwhelming. A man who is used to casual connections, to low-effort interactions, to relationships that don't require depth, he's not equipped for a woman who brings emotional clarity. He's not used to someone who knows what she wants, expresses it without fear, and stands on it without compromise. So what does he do? He hesitates. He overanalyzes. He starts pulling back, not because he doesn't feel something, but because what he feels is stronger than what he's used to. You see, authenticity has a way of accelerating emotions. It brings things to the surface quickly. There's no guessing, no wondering, no chasing illusions. Everything becomes clear. And when things become clear, decisions have to be made. And that's where the pressure really hits. Because now he can't stay in the in-between. He can't just linger without direction. He can't keep things undefined. Your authenticity forces a choice. Either he steps into something real with you or he steps away entirely. And for a man who isn't ready, that kind of decision feels heavy. He might not say it out loud, but internally he's battling with himself. He's thinking about the responsibility that comes with being with a woman like you. He's thinking about the expectations, not unrealistic expectations, but real ones. Loyalty, effort, presence, growth. And if he knows he's not ready to give those things, instead of being honest about it, he starts creating distance. Not because you pushed him, but because your authenticity revealed where he stands. And let's go even deeper. When you are authentic, you don't just expose his actions, you expose his intentions. You can see through inconsistency. You can feel when something is off. And because you trust yourself, you don't ignore those feelings. That alone creates pressure. Because now he knows he can't fool you. He can't hide behind excuses. He can't present a false version of himself and expect you to accept it. And for a man who is used to getting away with things, that's uncomfortable. So he might try to label you. He might say you're too serious or too intense or too emotional. But what he's really reacting to is the fact that you're too real. You're not playing the game. And without the game, he doesn't know how to operate. But here's what you need to understand: your authenticity is not a problem. It is your power. It is the thing that filters out what isn't meant for you. It is the thing that brings truth into every situation, whether people are ready for it or not. And yes, that truth can create pressure. But that pressure serves a purpose. It reveals character. It exposes intentions. It separates those who are serious from those who are not. Because a man who is ready, emotionally ready, mentally ready, he won't run from your authenticity. He'll meet it. He'll appreciate it. He'll feel safe in it because he's not trying to hide anything. But a man who isn't ready, he'll feel overwhelmed. He'll feel exposed. He'll feel like he's being pushed even when you're simply being yourself. And that's when he pulls away. So don't ever confuse someone's inability to handle your authenticity with a flaw in who you are. You're not too much because you're honest. You're not too intense because you're clear. You're not too different because you refuse to pretend. You are simply operating at a level of truth that not everyone is prepared to meet. And if that creates pressure, then let it. Because that pressure is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's making space for someone who doesn't feel intimidated by your realness, but instead feels at home in it. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that a lot of women misunderstand. When a man starts to feel like he's losing control, that's when his behavior changes the most. And when you are a woman who stands firm in who you are, who doesn't bend easily, who doesn't chase or beg or settle, you create a situation where he no longer feels in control. Now listen to me carefully. Control for many men is tied to comfort. It's tied to knowing where they stand, knowing what to expect, and knowing that the outcome is in their favor. When a man feels like he has that control, he relaxes. He moves confidently. He invests at his own pace because he believes the situation isn't going anywhere. But when he meets a woman like you, that comfort disappears because now he doesn't know. He doesn't know if you'll tolerate inconsistency. He doesn't know if you'll wait around. He doesn't know if you'll accept excuses. And most importantly, he doesn't know if you'll stay. And that uncertainty, that's what triggers fear. You see, when a man feels like he could lose you at any moment, not because you're playing games, but because you genuinely value yourself enough to walk away, that shakes him. That forces him into a position where he has to either step up or risk losing something real. But here's the truth: a lot of men are not used to that kind of pressure. They're used to women staying. They're used to second chances. They're used to being forgiven without change. They're used to having access without effort. So when you come into his life and disrupt that pattern, it creates tension inside him. Because now he realizes that he can't operate the same way. He can't take his time casually figuring things out while you sit there waiting. He can't disappear and come back expecting the same energy. Can't give half and receive whole. And instead of adapting, instead of rising to meet the moment, a lot of men panic. Now, panic doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks like distance. He starts pulling back. He becomes inconsistent. He hesitates to move forward. And you're sitting there thinking, what changed? What changed is this: he realized he doesn't have control over you. And instead of embracing that, instead of respecting your independence and meeting you where you are, he starts trying to protect himself from the possibility of losing control completely. Because losing control to an insecure man feels like losing power. And losing power feels like losing himself. So what does he do? He creates space. He slows things down. He avoids deeper conversations. He keeps things surface level so he doesn't have to fully invest. Because the moment he fully invests, the moment he truly opens up, he risks something. He risks caring too much. And when a man cares deeply about a woman he cannot control, that's when the fear becomes real. Because now it's not just about ego anymore, it's about vulnerability. It's about the possibility of being hurt. It's about the realization that you could walk away and he wouldn't be able to stop. And that's a position many men are not emotionally prepared to be in. So instead of stepping into that vulnerability, instead of embracing the connection, they try to regain control in other ways. They might pull back to see if you'll chase. They might become inconsistent to test your patience. They might act detached to protect their emotions. But what they're really doing is struggling internally. Struggling with the fact that they've met someone they can't manipulate, can't predict, and can't take for granted. And let me tell you something that's not your problem to fix. You are not responsible for making a man feel in control of you. You are not here to make yourself predictable, manageable, or easy just so he can feel comfortable. Your role is to be yourself, to stand in your truth, to honor your standards, and to walk away from anything that doesn't align with your value. And if that makes him feel like he's losing control, then maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Because a healthy relationship is not built on control, it's built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. A secure man doesn't need to control you. He doesn't need to feel like he has the upper hand. He doesn't need to question whether you'll stay because he knows he's giving you a reason to. But an insecure man, he depends on control to feel safe. And when that control is gone, he feels exposed. That's why he pulls back. That's why he hesitates. That's why he sometimes walks away from something that could have been real. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were too real for him to control. And here's what I need you to understand: when a man is afraid of losing control, he's not afraid of you, he's afraid of what you represent. You represent standards. You represent self-respect. You represent a level of independence that cannot be manipulated. And that forces him to confront whether he can truly show up as the man you require. If he can, he will. If he can't, he'll retreat. It's that simple. So never mistake his distance for your inadequacy. Never think you have to become easier to keep someone around, because the right man won't need to control you to stay. He'll choose you freely, confidently, and consistently. And the moment a man realizes he cannot control you but still wants to be with you, that's when you know you're dealing with someone who is ready. Until then, let him be intimidated. Because the fear of losing control doesn't come from weakness in you, it comes from strength he hasn't yet learned how to match.